It was back in 1937 that the doors of Katara Public School were opened and the new mistress, Margaret Tighe, welcomed the first enrolment.
And I walked into the progress hall there and there was only one child waiting to start school, and I thought, well, it's just as well, because you see there were no tables or chairs, no books, no pencils, just no anything really.
From those humble beginnings, the school, only small in structure, has grown in class size. For all the former students now scattered across the country, the weekend's reunion was a time to share old memories and to take a closer look at how education has changed over half a century. And what birthday would be a party without a cake? Sharing the honours was a 78-year-old former teacher and one of her first students. One thing that hasn't changed over the past 50 years is the motto. Truth, honour and dignity will always remain with Katara Public School. The Pilbara was left stranded in the floating dockyard when striking workers black-banned the completion of the routine maintenance check. The painters and dockers' dispute over the handling of the retrenchment of workers left the ship high and dry for more than 2 weeks. But the decision to finish the work allowed the Pilbara to berth at Lee Wharf late yesterday afternoon. Last night she left Newcastle Harbour, heading for Hobart, Melbourne and then on to her home port of Fremantle in Western Australia. Meanwhile, Newcastle Harbour farewelled another visitor, the Iron Pacific. The massive bulk carrier is the largest coal ship in the world, able to carry 200,000 tonnes. The Iron Pacific will pick up more coal at Port Kembla before heading for Japan. A new shipping venture between Newcastle and Singapore has also been launched. As the Iron Pacific left our shores, the Barbara Hector arrived. The giant roll-on, roll-off container ship is one of a fleet of vessels operated by Scan Carriers in a new round-the-world service. Newcastle has been included as a port of call because of a growth in aluminium shipments, and significant savings in transport costs are now expected for Hunter and North Coast exporters. The vessels will visit Newcastle monthly, sailing to Singapore and on to Hong Kong, Japan, North America and Europe.
Mick Reynolds, who's progressed through surfboards and the surf life-saving movement to wave skis, is now seeing his dreams come true as his designs are being seen as possible market leaders in Japan and even the US. While the sport is perhaps still in its infancy in Japan and even China, the retailers have sent a young Japanese lad here to learn the skills of the ski to take back home. How are they going in Japan?
Very well. We're selling in the hundreds over there now and it's looking very, very well.
So you'll be eventually going over that way, I suppose, to follow up your designs and see how it's going?
Yes, I'm in a very lucky position where my designs have been selected to go over to Japan and they've been sent over there, and I'll be going over there in September, I hope, to demonstrate the wave skis and to show how to Eskimo roll and judging. Right. Yes.
And into the States too, I believe?
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got our skis currently over in the United States, yes, and they're going very well over there too.
Mick, the former Newcastle champion and 2 times winner of the Bali International, says his young charge is coming along nicely. Am I right? Newcastle seems to be almost the capital for wave skis. We've got several brands here that are starting to do well throughout the world.
Newcastle is the capital of the world for wave skis, without a doubt. It's got the Newcastle Wave Ski Club is the strongest club in Australia, the strongest club in the world, the largest membership.
And the designs are coming from this part of the world too?
Yes, that's why it's good to design in Newcastle, because you've got a lot of competition and you can get good ideas and compete against good riders and try out different designs.
Goninans was contracted only last November to build the latest breed of train for the Sydney Metropolitan Network. The first is due for delivery late this year and to go into service early next. Mr Fitzgerald, described as rubbish, reports that the Australian content is too low, saying 80% is local and 200 subcontractors in New South Wales have been engaged to work on Tangara. However, the General Manager did say confusion may be caused by the fact that the appearance or shape of the train is British.
The contract for the styling of the Tangara was let on a worldwide basis. It's only a very small part for people to put forward the concept of how a car will look. And this final selection was made in favour of a British company. Therefore, people are thinking it's a British design. But where one or two people over a couple of weeks can produce such a feature, Goninans have got over 50 people working on the designing of this car right now.
So in fact it's a British shape, but you make it happen in an engineering sense.
Yes, the SRA thought that the shape was a better looking car from the rest, but then we have to do all the design work to enable it to be made to conform to the stringent requirements, engineering, strength, performance and everything else.
20% won't be Australian. What 20% is that?
It's related mostly to sophisticated electronics, to some of the more involved technology done overseas that it's just not economically feasible to set up and manufacture in Australia.
So you completely reject the idea that there's not enough Australian content?
No, this is an Aussie car, and never before has 80% of the car been Australian built.
According to Bill Farrens, head of BHP's Rod and Bar division, Newcastle Steelworks is running about 100,000 tonnes short of its steel output target for this financial year. He says the shortfall is due to increased industrial problems and some mechanical breakdowns. Although he admits that it's a short-term problem, Mr Farrens believes strongly that Newcastle Steelworks has to lift its productivity. He believes each employee will have to produce at least 400 to 450 tonnes a year to compete with the mini-mills.
Newcastle Steelworks cannot continue with the current level of productivity. It has to make major improvements. We are trying very hard to avoid retrenchments, and of course as a signatory to the steel plan we're committed through 1988 to there being no retrenchments. But there is no question that we have to make steel here at Newcastle with less people.
But the Federated Ironworkers say that if each person was to produce about 450 tonnes, it would mean, at current operation levels, 1,400 jobs would be lost, and that would be totally opposed by the union movement.
It appears that the company has laid the blame for this drop in production squarely at the feet of the workers. They couldn't be further from the truth. They are engineering and mechanical breakdowns. The workforce since '82 has made dramatic change to work practices. Numbers have been reduced by some 5,000 people, yet the company still complains. We think their complaints are totally unfair and unjustified, and the management should start to congratulate the workforce for their efforts from the steel industry crisis of '82 and from the attitude of the workforce where they are prepared to accept change.
Following the council's decision, the motel can now be built on 3 blocks right in the middle of this housing estate beside the Pacific Highway. The plans show a cluster development of 51 bungalows, a swimming pool, entertainment area, tennis courts, restaurant and function rooms. The company Gamer Whitby and Gamer Proprietary Limited owns the land, and it was Barry Gamer who developed the original estate, but at that time said he had no intention of putting in a motel. A rezoning strategy by the Port Stephens Shire Council a few months ago has now made that possible. The decision to build the complex has met with opposition from both local moteliers and residents. Moteliers say there's insufficient business to support a fifth motel, and the residents say it will detract from their estate. Alan Cox says an important lesson has been learnt the hard way.
Across from us. Read your contracts. When you come to purchase property, make sure that you discover what's in the fine print. When you see in one section of the contract that hotels, motels, hostels, liquor licence outlets will not be allowed, don't take that for granted. Just have a look a little further on and you may see that the owner has the right to change that for possibly the next 15 years. That's the lesson.
The charges relate to an incident in the Salvation Army's Red Shield shop in Hunter Street on December 2 last year. Police allege in a record of interview tendered in the trial that a 4-year-old girl had been playing with toys in the shop, that the youth lured her into a men's toilet at the back of the shop by asking her if she wanted to see some puppies. Police allege that he admits to trying to have sex with the girl and to trying to strangle her. The Crown claimed that at the time of the incident the youth had intended to kill the girl. But the youth's defence counsel, Peter Hidden QC, told the court that the youth had been examined by a doctor. He could be suffering from a form of epilepsy. His behaviour was often spontaneous and irrational. He said when the boy was strangling the girl he did not expect to kill her. The truth was the boy did not know what he was trying to do. However, before the jury reached its verdict, Judge Lee dismissed them after reading a new medical report.
The psychiatric report said that the youth could be suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy. Judge Lee said that if this was the case, then it would be open to the jury to say that he was not criminally responsible. The jury was dismissed and the case will be reheard.
Democrat leader Senator Janine Haynes was in Newcastle today to speak at a Chamber of Commerce lunch. She says the Democrats are worried that the Liberal Party will waver in its opposition to the Australia card. She claims fear that the government will call a double dissolution and therefore an early election could encourage the Liberals to back down.
I'm very worried indeed. The government doesn't have to use the Australia card bill if it doesn't want to. It's not forced to. But it would like to have an early election to capitalise on the disarray in the opposition parties. And I'm very worried indeed that what they are then likely to do is make sure that 4 or 5 of their people in the Senate cross the floor and give the government that piece of legislation, and that I think would be a disaster.
Senator Haynes is not at all worried, however, about the implications of an early election for the Democrats. She says the party is in great shape.
A double dissolution means that the quota for the Senate, of course, is halved, and we don't have to get 14 and a bit percent, we only need to get 7 and a bit percent. But the polls recently from around the capital cities have been very good for us, 10, 11, 12, 13% in the major capitals in Australia, and that means that we're looking okay even for a half Senate election either later this year or early next year. We don't need a double dissolution.
The Housing Industry Association says things look bleak and it's not going to get any better unless the governments take some action soon. In the Hunter region, approvals for home buyers are down 40% compared to last year, and that tops the state's overall approval rate by 10%. The housing crisis has left 60,000 hopefuls on the public housing waiting list, as well as cause a tight rental squeeze and a no-win situation for home buyers facing soaring interest rates. The HIA says the blame lies on both the shoulders of the banks demanding deregulation and on the governments responsible for the high interest rate climate. Sharing the bad news at a Newcastle HIA trade seminar last night, Chief Executive Remo Nogarotto says there's a dim light on the horizon, but doesn't hold much hope for the immediate future of the housing industry.
Have the governments listened to the association's advice? What results have we seen?
Well, we haven't seen too many, to be perfectly honest. The federal government is obviously pursuing a line of economic policy that we believe isn't necessarily conducive to a healthy housing industry. But we're optimistic that over the passage of time, given some time, we'll be able to convince the governments that they need to do something fairly quickly.
But the immediate future doesn't look good.
Unfortunately, the immediate future doesn't look good, A, for the people who are out there looking for a home, and B, for the participants in the industry like builders, manufacturers, suppliers and subcontractors. No.
The message behind the telethon theme song is as simple as it sounds. The locally written You've Got to Say No was produced by the Warren Drilling Corporation, but it's through the efforts of hundreds of people behind the scenes that will help to make this year's telethon a success. Last night in Newcastle, the song and a video clip were released, spreading the word against drug abuse. Entertainers Billy Wild and Doug Parkinson are backed up by local performers, and they've all given their time freely to a cause which has touched some of them personally.
There's a number of reasons. First of all, because of my concern for adolescents, and I do believe in the concept of training children from a very young age to not believe that they can say no, if you like. And also because my brother was actually a heroin addict and I watched him deteriorate horribly. By the time he was 23, he was 50 years old. It was too much for this little black buck.
Being an entertainer, seeing a lot of what goes on, and now having to face it as a parent of my kids, I thought maybe I could strike another blow, you see.
All profits from the record sales will go to Telethon 87's beneficiary, Hunter Life Education. And with the big day just 1 week away, the catchy tune is set to help spell out the message of drug education.
Mr Greiner says Newcastle isn't alone in the crime rise, but he says the areas of sexual assault and drug offences are of particular concern here. While the state average for drug offences is 3.8 per 1,000 people in the 1985-86 period, Newcastle recorded 4.3 per 1,000. In the area of sexual assault, Newcastle recorded 6.2 per 10,000, while the state average is only 5.9 per 10,000 people. Mr Greiner says another alarming statistic is that the Newcastle clear-up rate for all crime is less than a third of offences recorded by police. Mr Greiner is calling for more police to reverse what he claims is a soft attitude to law enforcement. Opposition spokesperson on Community Services, Virginia Chadwick, says these latest statistics are appalling.
I think like every other citizen in Newcastle, I'm shocked. I think most of us in the community have felt that locally there's been an increase in violent crime and an increase in evidence of drug offences in the district, but to find that we have such notoriety in topping the state is really quite shocking.
No one from Police Minister Paciulo's office was available to confirm or deny Mr Greiner's claims today, and no one from the Newcastle Police District was available for comment.
A Newcastle woman has begun her own crusade to increase the penalty for these offences. Mrs Faye Morrison has collected more than 3,000 signatures on a petition she intends to deliver to State Parliament.
They slap them on the wrist and give them a good talking to, and they give them 18 years. They're out with a 3 months parole period or something so stupid, you know, that they're out again on the streets before you've got time to gather your wits. And they do the same thing again. Well, I mean, it's no...
Visitors passed through the gates to the coal loader. That was enough people to keep 6 buses operating all day, conducting 2 tours each hour. Tours of the loader and port facility were provided by Kooragang staff members, who report that most people were impressed with the sheer size of the facility. The loader was opened in 1984, has an investment of $245 million. Each year it loads 10 million tonnes of local coal, but has a capacity to expand to service 50 million tonnes per annum. General Manager of the coal loader, Dennis Stone, says he had personal reasons for wanting to show off the loader to the people of Newcastle and the local region.
One is that the general impression of a coal loader is that it's a very dirty, gritty old place, and I wanted to dispel that rumour. Secondly, the technology here, as far as I've seen in my travels around the world, is second to none, and I think Newcastle should be proud of that, and I wanted people to see it.
In the light of current negotiations...